Today we're going to discuss outsourcing of IT and why every company should do it. Outsourcing is no longer an option, it's a requirement. Sophie, today a lot of companies are finding themselves in this new COVID-19 area challenged and identified as a new complexity in the way business works. Things are no longer complicated, they are really complex. In this kind of situation, companies that have been getting along with their IT are finding that they have to adapt very quickly, not only for the future, but to survive right now. Yet a lot of them don't have the resources internally to do that. Can you talk to us a bit about why one should outsource? What are the advantages of outsourcing?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. So yes, of course, outsourcing is really not an option today in these difficult times because, first of all, I think that companies now need really to increase their EBITDA or to maintain their EBITDA and to maintain their cash flow as well. So I would say that price, first of all, is really something to think about and to tackle today. So outsourcing and especially offshoring or nearshoring will help different companies to reduce the cost of developing a digital product. So this is the first thing, and also to reduce the cost is not only, the hourly rate or the daily rate, but it's also the hidden cost. I don't know if you know this figure, but in the US, you need 40 days in average to find a developer. So during these 40 days, you will not develop your product. So you will be late on your roadmap. You will not get the revenue from the product, so it's a big waste.
And then there's also the fact that you may have an IT team, but they may not be best at doing this particular thing. You may have, developers who know one language, but you need another. You may not have anybody on staff who's very good at, say, iOS or Android, and you need to make an app that your employees can carry around. That seems like an ideal reason to outsource or offshore or nearshore. How does that work? What advantages do you bring to companies in that field?
Yeah, so I think that so we spoke a bit about the price, and another advantage would be the flexibility. Flexibility in two ways, I would say. First of all, is the ability to replace the resources, to replace the developers if they don't match the requirements, because it's of course much easier with a provider than with your own team. And this is one part. And the second one is the ability to pivot in the tech way, let's say. I can give an example. So I had a client with an internal team with the language. The team was specialized in React.js. But at some point, the client wanted to change technically the product because for many reasons, and he wanted to switch to Vue.js. But at this time, he couldn't, change his team like that. So he had to turn to outsourcing in order to be able to find people with Vue.js technology. And it was really, of course, much easier for him to do it than to train the people or to find new people. So it takes a lot of time to hire people, to onboard people in your own team. So I think that flexibility is really something very important to take into consideration. And outsourcing gives much more flexibility than internal team.
We've talked a bit about this whole concept of agile, that the world is no longer predictable. It's so complex, things come at you from every direction. Sure, some people say you could have predicted this pandemic, but many businesses could not have predicted how it was going to affect them. It was just beyond their scope. So you've got to remain much more agile, much more able to, as you said, pivot. I love the way it's pronounced. It makes me hungry, but pivot. So it strikes me that would be another advantage to outsourcing, right? I could be much more agile. I don't have to have much more than the main idea in order to turn to somebody like you who's got, 30,000 different developers you can reach out to, right?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear very well. My internet connection at home is not very good. So if you can repeat just the question, I'm sorry about that.
Precisely. So we need to pivot. In this new era, whether we don't know if our internet connection is working or we don't know if there'll be a pandemic around the corner, we need to be able to pivot and to be very agile, to be able to jump from one platform to another in the pursuit of whatever our business goals are. And I was just going to say, maybe you could talk a little more about how your access to so many different developers, so many different IT resources, managing resources, people resources can make it easier for companies to be agile without having to invest in huge teams themselves.
Yeah, you spoke about agile, and this is something very important, and I think we'll maybe talk later about that. And we're getting access to talent. This is something also, of course, very important, because in the US in particular, but not only, in all over the world, it's very difficult to find developers, to find talents in the IT field. So not only developers, but architects, product owners, Scrum Master, tester, QA, etc., etc. So you really need to be able to have a strong brand in order to be able to hire new talents, because if you are a startup, for instance, you compete with Facebook, you compete with Google. They are hiring hundreds and thousands of people every day and every year. So if you are a very successful startup, even if you are successful, it would be difficult for you to exist in this very competitive market. So coming back to the outsourcing, in fact, for instance, I can speak about what I know, which is Pentalog. We have access to a database of more than 300,000 people, developers, IT profiles. So we can source there the good developers that will match our clients' requirements very easily, and which is very important, very quickly. And also, if I may add something, the sourcing facility, it's the job. It should be the job actually of outsource provider. So, and this provider should have a very strong brand, should be international, and should be able to adapt to the tech stack of the client, etc., etc. Because, sorry.
So if I found a good outsourcing company, I should come to them and say, look, my business need is X. I think this might be a path to solve it. And then they will sit down with me and say, okay, this is what's doable. These are the people to do it. These are the people who manage it. This is how we interact with your company, all that kind of thing. How much do I have to bring to the table myself? And how much can a good outsourcing company do for me?
You need to find a provider who is very flexible on that, meaning that the provider can provide only developer resources, but if it doesn't have a strong process, a strong organization, you will bet only on the quality of the people, on the talent of the people. So doing that or hiring a freelancer would be quite the same. So this is the first thing. So a good provider should be able to provide not only the people but also all the process, all the framework in order for the people to be trained, to follow the process, to develop a good quality code, etc., etc. And for instance, in Pentalog, we can do all the complete workflow for the digital product. So coming from the idea to help the client in order to ideate his product, to build the backlog of the product, and then to build the product, to code, of course, to test it, and then to push the product in production, to monitor the server, and so on. So depending on your needs, I think that the best option will be to find a provider that is able to provide a large range of services, because if you are a startup, you will start with maybe a small team and a few features to develop, but after a while, you may need support, you may need monitoring, you may need tester, you may need more developers, etc., on other kind of talents.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about the process. I mean, the terms you're throwing around are really kind of crazy, like scrum, sprint, stand-ups. It sounds like something between a rugby match and a comedy show. How does that work, and how much of that would if I were, say, the CTO of a company that wanted to do something we couldn't do in-house, how much of that would I be in? What are those things, and how much would I be involved in it?
Yes, so you're speaking about a framework called Scrum, which is the most popular agile framework, but it's not the only one, of course. But it gives really a good structure to make the communication easy with between the teams, because if you outsource, you will work with a remote team. So you need to have a confidence. You need confidence. You need structure. You need process, and you need a lot of communication. So at least this Scrum framework comes with events, artifacts, roles. So, for instance, to speak about the events you mentioned, you have the daily stand-up. So the daily stand-up is a 15 minutes meeting daily. Normally stand up. So why it's stand up? Because it's supposed to last less time if people stand than if they are sitting. This is the idea, but of course you can do it by sitting if it's not more than 15 minutes. So this is every day something to check in with the developers. So at least every day you will see, or you will listen to the team. So this is first. After you have the sprint planning. So the sprint planning is before you want to develop a list of user stories, what we call in Scrum. So let's say features, for instance. You will have a meeting with the team in order to build the specific backlog for the sprint. So the sprint is an iteration of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It depends on the project. And so you have a sprint meeting, and after at the end of the sprint, you have the demo of the sprint. So where the team will show you what they accomplished during the sprint, and so at least you have these 3 meetings in a row. And then, for instance, in Pentalog, we are also putting another meeting, which is the steering committee, which is a more high-level meeting with the stakeholders from the client side and from Pentalog side, in order to speak about contract, for instance, issues with the team, maybe, or satisfaction of the client, etc., etc. So you really need to be sure that your provider will provide all these events governance, let's say, in order to have a well-oiled machine, in order to be able to communicate very often with the team.
So, and what if, some of these things, product manager or, people who are really the interface between my own employees and my own products and the technology development, sometimes I'm going to have to hire people in or train my own people to be able to do that, because I don't know, if I'm a logistics company, I need somebody who speaks the language of the already established ways we do business and can be the liaison between that and the tech. If I don't have those people inside my company, can you help me hire them, or can you help me identify them within my own company if you are the outsourcer? So I don't want to just hand over the keys to my company and say, come back with something that fits, and find that it misses the mark.
Yeah, of course. So yes, in Pentalog, for instance, we can help you hire some key people. So like you said, maybe the product owner, because this is someone who needs to know a lot about your specific business, and this is your business if you are talking about logistics, for instance. So product manager or product owner. What we can do, and what we are doing many times actually, is to in order to start fast, because this is also very important, is to provide this, for instance, product owner in our team, and then to transfer and to train someone from your company to be the future product owner. So the two person can work together for a while, for instance. So there is a knowledge transfer between them. And at the end of the day, you will have a product owner on your team, which is who will be trained with a good methodology. So this is something we can do. So help you recruit someone to be this product owner, or make a smooth transition, let's say, between a product owner in Pentalog and the product owner, a new product owner in your company, in your team.
Let me ask you something else. A lot of times what I've heard other people have heard about outsourcing or offshoring of tech development is that it goes to, countries where people have had very good technical training but aren't extremely proficient in English, at least in our case, or in other languages if you're in other countries, which is kind of part of what makes them available as a low-cost programming resource. That's why they're not working for Google, because they haven't quite got the language skill to get there. But how do I feel comfortable making sure that I can communicate with these people, and that what they, that they may be able to speak Python English, but my employees whose needs they ultimately have to meet speak a different kind of language of English. It's more nuanced in terms of needs and descriptions. So how do we manage that?
Yes, of course, it's linked to the communication part. So you need someone to develop a good code in terms of quality, but you also need him to be able to explain what he's doing, and you need to explain to him what you expect. So regarding the language, speaking language, let's say, or writing language, for instance, in Pentalog, we are providing a lot of foreign language lessons. So as a French based company, we have French lessons, but we have now, of course, a lot of English lessons as well in all our delivery center. So we have in each city, when we are settled, we have at least one person, one English teacher hired full time in order to train our people in English. So and to be involved also in the life of a company, so they know they can work on very concrete and very actual cases. of our clients. They can show a document, for instance, and say, what do you understand on this document? So it is very, so we are doing that. Also in the...
So it's no longer the sort of my tailor is rich. The classic way French students learned English, yeah.
No, it's not. And also we really want the client in Pentalog again to be part of the sourcing process. So of course, a client will be able to interview himself the potential future team members, outsourced team members, but it's still team member, in order to be able to see if the English is good enough in order to work with them. So English or French or other languages, or German, for instance. So really the client is involved in this process in order to be sure that yes, he will be able to work, just work with this person. Also, and it's very important also that the provider you select in that case will propose you the resume at first, but during the interview, make sure that the guy that you have interviewed will be the guy working with you after in the project. So this is something linked to the transparency, which is also very important in this outsource world.
So once you've developed a product for me, do you continue to be sort of the managers of the product even after it's been developed? That as people, my staff starts to use it and they find new ways or they have questions, they want it tweaked, do they keep coming back to you? Or whoever my outsourcer is, do I have kind of a long-term contract to continue the maintenance and development of the product? Or is that something I have to hire in?
No, of course, it will be much easier for you to have some team members or at least one person from the team who develop the product to be able to continue on the maintenance of the product if it's the case. So yes, you can ask your provider during the negotiating phase, during the contract phase, in order to add this specific maintenance phase. So the provider will be able to keep some knowledge in this company in order to be able to do the maintenance. Yes, this is also important.
Geographically, one tends again to think that a lot of this stuff happens in Eastern Europe, but that's not always on my time zone. And I don't always want to be talking to somebody where it's 3 a.m. where he is or she is, and I might not be getting their best efforts because we all know at the end of the day that our bodies operate on something of a natural clock. Are there other outsourcing centers around the world that I should be looking for that have a reputation?
Yes, of course. So in the US, Latin America is, of course, some a destination which is now, I think, quite well known in order of in terms of outsourcing. Especially in Pentalog, we have a great team in Mexico, in Guadalajara, precisely. Mm-hmm. So Guadalajara is 1 hour less than New York Eastern time, and 2 hours from Silicon Valley. So this is really ideal to work with the team in terms of time difference. Yes. So yes, this is also key to. Yes.
I went to the bullfights there, which was really interesting. Sort of a rodeo and bullfight, and nice city. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, this is a great place.
So let me ask you, going back to the big picture of things, we're in this new highly complex world where we need to be, as we said earlier, agile. We need to react faster. Just tell me a little bit about how that affects even the outsourcing work. Are there any examples of that, or just what one should be thinking of as one, what is changing and what does one need to be so agile for in terms of tech outsourcing?
Well, agile is important because it's the only way to be able to finally deliver a product which matches the needs of the final users. Why that? Because in Agile you don't spend months writing requirements. And after 6 months, let's say, the market is not ready for that. So you will take time to write something which is useless at the end of the day. So working in Agile means that you need a big picture. You need the structure. You need to have a vision of a product, of a digital product, but just globally, and then. For each sprint, like I said before, for each 2 weeks, for instance, in that case, you will write the requirements, or we call that user stories in Agile, just for the 2 weeks. And then you will have the features developed in the 2 weeks, and etc., step by step. And then you have also the possibility with this iteration way to improve the way of working, because at the end of each sprint you will look back at what you have done, and you will be able to say okay, this was not so good, so we have to improve that. This was very good, we need to repeat that, etc., etc. So it's
a reality check every 2 weeks.
Sorry, what's that?
A reality check, we say in American.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yes. In French, is that the?
Sorry.
Mise à jour, is that the French phrase?
Yes, we can say that. We can say that.
So it helps you make sure that you don't go down a path with, I have this great idea, but 6 months later, the market conditions have changed, or you lose, I guess, that very important first mover advantage, right?
Yeah.
And that's something you can preserve with outsourcing, that you need to be the first mover in your category. And I would think, particularly as we're in this COVID-19 era where things are really changing quickly, that would be really important to be the first person to think of a new way of doing business.
Yes. Yeah.
And sorry, our producer tells us we had a question from the audience, which flashed on my screen before I could read it. Can you flash that again? Let's see. I guess not. Okay, sorry. We will work on updating our technology for the next broadcast.
I can see it. That still means something to talk about maintenance when everyone's on continuous delivery and improvement. That still means something to talk about maintenance. I'm not sure I understand the question, but we can have in the same team, we can have some people doing the maintenance and some people doing continuous delivery. And this is what is happening in a lot of Pentalog projects, because to give maybe a last figure on that, clients are working with us in average of more than 3.5 years. So it's a long-term relationship. So when the client comes and want to develop a product, at the beginning maybe we will develop a product from scratch, but then after a while we'll have to maintain the first version of a product, and so on and so on. So in a lot of teams, in a lot of projects, we will mix maintenance and new features. I'm not sure. I guess if this will answer the question.
Yeah, I guess the question is also, how do you keep focused on both maintaining a product that is now in service and developing new parts of it? Are these different people who have those responsibilities, or is that the same team that can do both?
It is a very good and difficult question, because at the same time it's more efficient to specialize people doing one thing, which is maintenance, for instance. And but there is here a potential problem of motivation of the people, and it's difficult to hire developers, so it's also difficult to keep them. So if they are not motivated, it's tricky. So and in the philosophy of Agile is good to mix the skills. It's good to mix the projects. So I think that the answer would be that people will maybe have a rotation working on maintenance tasks or new feature tasks in order to keep the motivation and to keep the knowledge also inside the team. Because if you have only one or two people, depending on the size of the team, or maybe more, but working on the subjects, on one subject, and if they leave, then you lose all the knowledge. So, but if all the team is working on both the two subjects, then it's less risky.
Wow, Sophie, this has been absolutely fascinating explanation of why companies need to outsource their IT, why it's a great advantage even if you have internal IT resources. And it's particularly useful as we're trying to, we call this thing DEFCON 19 as a sort of play on war games, and on 19 as in COVID from 2019, how you can make your company survive and prepare for this era of COVID-19. This is really interesting. I hope this was useful to our listeners. Again, Sophie Lelarge in Orléans. I'm Peter Green in New York, and thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Bye.